Welcome to Codex Rex, the video game history podcast. My name is Dachz. I am your host.
And I am your co-host, Tyler.
Since you're the better one explaining what this podcast is, could you please do that?
Not a problem. Codex Rex is a video game history podcast where each episode we examine something about video game history. It could be something cultural, it could be a specific game series and how it's made, it could be an influential person, it can even be just a concept that is like a thread throughout a lot of video games. Yeah. And basically one of us does research on a specific topic, and the other person goes in without any knowledge of what we're about to talk about.
And shut the fuck up and listens. Yeah.
Yeah, sit down and shut up right now. These are fucking video games, and they are very important.
But Tyler, it is the Christmas season, so we need to be a bit nicer to each other and to everybody around us, because it is the time of Slaanesh and the... oh, wait, no. It's the time of Christ. I confused something.
Slaanesh, the god of excess, sounds like a pretty suitable chaos god to fit into such a situation. Give more.
How have you been doing in these greedy times?
Oh, well, I kind of hate the holidays. I'm kind of curmudgeonly, and Andrea is trying to sort of drag me across the festive finish line, we'll call it, to do things like decorate a tree and, send out cards.
While Tyler tells me this, there's a Christmas tree in the background, and I know with 100% certainty that for the last few days he has been thinking about doing a Christmas stream tomorrow, and it's so.
It is.
You're still leaning into it though.
Oh, of course. Yeah, we call it Uncle Giveaway's Horrible Holiday Special, and it is probably my favorite thing that I do on the stream. So.
Nice, awesome. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too.
It will have happened when this episode airs.
Yeah,
but it will happen every year, I hope.
I hope so too. I always leave the VOD up though, if you ever want to see what terror that is. So what have you been playing these days, man?
I'm playing something that we have to do an episode about at some point. I'm playing Death Stranding by Kojima, and it's a trip, but I love it.
Funny enough, I'm also playing Death Stranding because we all influence each other around here.
Yes.
And I love how we're all sort of roughly at the same spot in the game. Like, not really, like you guys are a bit further ahead of me, but like the fact that like we're all sort of there, traipsing across the wasteland together and we have no idea what's fucking going on is like, it's very exciting to me. So I think there's like 4 or 5 of us right now who are all playing it.
It's insane.
Oh man, what a good game though.
Yeah, really awesome. It's a piece of art. Especially
really
the
is.
Monster Energy drink part.
Unleash the beast, bro.
Okay. So if one would like to contact us or talk to us or hang out with us, how would one do that?
Well, the easiest way to get a hold of me is to either pop into my Twitch stream, which is I'm just Vegan Tyler on Twitch, or you could pop into the Discord, which you can find a link to that on my Twitch page, or you could send me an email at vegantylerttv@gmail.com. So if you ever have any suggestions for the podcast, or you just want to send me hate mail or something, I guess, that would be the place to do it. Please don't send me hate mail.
Yeah, hate mail goes to Tyler. Once. Yeah, you did get an email from whom?
I got an email once, and I was really excited.
Was it hate mail?
No, it was an email. I was like, oh, wow, I got an email. And it was like, hey, I just made this tool that lets small podcasters aggregate all of their data, but it costs you a subscription fee a month. And I just wanted to tell you about it. And I was like,
it was spam.
Oh.
Awesome.
It was spam. It was spam masquerading as a nice email from someone. So.
At least they didn't sell you Viagra, so it's okay.
Yeah. Anyway, that's how you find me. How would someone find you, Dachz?
They don't. I don't talk to people.
Okay, that's fair.
Or you're going to Tyler's Discord and you just say my name 3 times and I show up.
You just burrow out of whatever hole you've crawled into.
Yes.
So.
Okay. Do you want to start?
Yeah. What are we going to talk about today, man?
Okay. So today we go way back, and It's only kind of a Christmas theme, but only because it starts at Christmas. And we start in 1926.
Okay.
Calvin Coolidge is president. Al Capone just became the boss of the Chicago Mafia. And the prohibition is in full effect. It's the 23rd of December, only one day until Christmas. And a boy is born in Pipestone, Minnesota. His name is Benjamin Gurley. He will be shot and killed in the middle of this episode.
Okay.
But this is not a true crime podcast. So I'm going to say this right away. And I will not dwell on his death, and we will not get into it, and we will not discuss how it happened and who did it and stuff like that. But it happens. And I pondered a while, how do I put this into this? I was like, this is not a true crime podcast. I'm just going to say it right away. He will be shot. That was terrible. But this is not what this episode is about.
I'm sorry to laugh at a man's death. I'm just like, okay.
And the important thing is about why he was shot is because if he wouldn't have been shot, he would have achieved much more. Because what he will do in this episode will change, you might say change the world, or at least change video game culture and video game history. So when he was 15 years old, just to get more of the time frame, the US joined the war against Germany. And the fighting would be over before he turned 19. And I wasn't sure if he ever was drafted. But I kind of looked up the drafting laws in the USA. And apparently, according to the Universal Military Training Act of 1951, he was required to join the military service. So he must have.
So I can shed a little bit of light on this. So basically, we have something called the Selective Service Act, although it might have been called something back in the day. Anyway, regardless, we had draft laws, and pretty much unless you had a good excuse, like a legit good excuse, just about everyone of fighting age got drafted for World War II. Now, if you were like in college, or you had a medical disability, or some other compelling reason, then you didn't have to go. Funny enough, they actually still make us sign up, just males, sign up for the draft, but they haven't used it back since Vietnam. So I actually wasn't able to do I had this whole discussion with one of my teachers back in high school about the whole process and such. And basically you can't even get federal loans to go to college if you don't sign up for it. So it's like they make you. But regardless, back to the original topic, it's very likely he probably got drafted because that's what
I thought as well. But I just couldn't find anything on it. I think we run into this quite often, that some people just don't have their stuff all out in the public. So you just don't know about them. He kind of disappears for a while, and he resurfaces in the 50s as an engineer at MIT. And he works with two other engineers called Ken Olsen and Harlan Anderson.
Okay.
They are founders of the so-called Digital Equipment Corporation, the DEC. And let's talk about those two for a bit, about Olsen and Anderson, because their story is pretty neat. Both of them earned themselves master's degrees in electrical engineering. Olsen had been repairing radios in his dad's garage from when he was a young boy. And Anderson actually was a physics major that got into computer science when he talked to a colleague from the University of Illinois about how they were building the ELIAC-1, which, without going into too much detail, was the first computer owned by a public education institution. And if we talk about computers, we mean house-sized, vacuum tube-filled monsters.
Oh, yeah.
Just imagine this beast that consists of these gigantuous glass tubes that you would only today find in hi-fi installations. And it weighed 5 tons, and it ate punch cards for instructions. You couldn't, there was no other way to program it. And he learned about that, and that's how he got into electrical engineering. Anderson. Olsen was the boss of Anderson and Gurley, of both of them, at the MIT Lincoln Laboratory, which is a federally funded R&D center concerned with national security. Lincoln Laboratory operates to this day, and the 3 engineers were part of the so-called Project Whirlwind. And this project focused on calculating computational solutions to intercepting air threats, aerial strikes, by being able to quickly extrapolate a defensive response using data collected by radar stations. So they built computers to calculate that really quickly. The computers they created during their time there are known as the TX0 and the TX2. These machines could describe as a landmark in computer science because they brand the transition from computers that use vacuum tubes to computers that use transistors.
Oh, shit. Okay, that would be a pretty big landmark.
Yeah, because transistors is what we use until today, just in smaller versions. Like the Iliac-1 that inspired Anderson, that was a vacuum tube computer. And the TX0 and TX2 that were the first transistor computers. So yeah, they introduced the use of transistors in computing, and this technology stays prevalent until today. So these guys were the pioneers of transistor computing, or they learned from the pioneers and then were the first ones to build the machines. Having a lot of experience with this kind of technology, Anderson and Olson left this ivory tower of military funding in 1957. And tried to make it on their own. They had the ambition and the skill, but they lacked money. And in one interview, Anderson explains how they believed that they could just walk into a bank without money, pitch their idea, and walk out with stacks of cash. Like, yeah, you know, they were just like, yeah, we are geniuses. We can do this. We work for the military. We know things nobody else knows. They're just going to shower us in cash. According
I just like, you could just like stretch that idea so far, right? Like, yeah, anything we fucking propose, they're gonna give us money for because we're fucking brilliant. All right, so I'm thinking rocket powered unicorn toy car for little boys and little girls. Okay, you know, it's the 50s. We're trying to change some things here. And you know, you can actually attach it to the top of your house, and it works as a fucking satellite dish. Everybody's going to want one.
I'm not good with American accents, but that's a Jersey one, right?
Dude, I don't fucking know. Probably. Maybe, I don't know. I'm sorry to anybody who's in Jersey who potentially could be offended. They're not going to be. Yeah.
According to him, they get rejected a lot. And...
Good.
They at some point they just decided we gotta sit down in the library and just learn about how to apply to funding. Like, how do we apply for any kind of funding from a bank?
I just feel like this is the point in the movie, right? Like, if this is the movie, the cinematic movie that I'm visualizing, right? This is the montage of them being like, we're the fucking best. We're geniuses. We're going to get so much money. And then it's just like a montage of like people stamping no on a piece of paper.
Yes. And then they have this drunk conversation in a bar. And they're like, dude, we got to do something about this. We got to figure out how to do it. And then there's a training montage where they sit down in the library and they just learn about they learn about accounting and money. And
right, like one of them's like falling asleep and he like shoves his buddy to wake up and he starts scribbling furiously, right? One of them starts screaming, "I've got it!" And the librarian looks over and she gives him a shh, right? Yeah. Like, oh yeah, this is a total 80s movie for sure, right there.
An 80s movie in the 50s, yeah. They stitched...
An 80s movie about the 50s.
Yes. So they did stitch together at some point. They figured out how to stitch together some financial statements, profit and cash flow and balance projections, and they applied for so-called venture capital at the American Research and Development, and they got their funding. If you don't know what venture capital is, it's just like you say you have this business idea and some kind of financing group gives you a huge chunk of money with a great amount of risk. And the only thing that they get back is they own part of your company.
Right.
The first 2 years in their company, the DEC, they basically only designed modules that could be assembled into more complicated circuitries. And because they knew that they had to make quick returns to satisfy their investors. And in the first year, they made $94,000 of revenue, which is about $1 million today.
Wow.
But they only created modules for these truck-sized computers that could only be operated by borderline geniuses with millions of dollars as funding. And that wasn't what they actually wanted to do. They wanted to open up the use of computers to a broader audience. And the idea was like, what if they could build a machine that was designed not just to be effective, but also user-friendly in a way? Because computers, like if you wanted to use a computer, you had to understand every inch of it. And they figured that that's not the way for the future of computing, because there were so many applications you could use computing in that it wasn't used yet. So here's a quote by Ken Olsen, the founder. "We had a dream of interactive computing.
Okay.
Normal computing was considered big, expensive, awesome, beyond ordinary people. Interactive computing was exciting and fun, and people could interact directly with the computer." And this is kind of where Benjamin Gurley comes in. Since he also worked at Project Whirlwind for the military, he was familiar with the technology these guys were using. And apparently Gurley was known to be like a brilliant designer, and they wanted to make use of his expertise to fuse all of their modules into their dream computer, the machine that would do their bidding. So the DEC at this time already consisted of 5 people. Ben was given leadership over the creation of this new machine, which would be called the Programmed Data Processor 1, or in short, the PDP-1. And as I said, he was supposed to use the products they already created, all these modules that they usually just sold to other people that already had computers, and they could build them into them. But he was supposed to use all these modules, fuse them together into their machine, and make their computer out of that.
Okay. So computers at this time, right? Giant, monstrous, room-sized insanity that you have to use punch cards and stuff. And so if what you're saying is correct, they just made modules, and now they're basically trying to make the first, like, home PC? Is that what you're saying? Not necessarily like a home PC, but like something that's more like...
They tried to make something that's smaller, especially affordable. Like, how much do you think a computer cost at the time?
Oh, so like from what I know about the big ones, they were like millions of dollars.
The Iliac 1 cost $3 million to build.
Yeah, and you usually only saw them, at least from what I understand, don't quote me on this, at like either military institutions like you were talking about, or like academic institutions.
And that was only the cost to buy it. The amounts of electricity they ate was insane because vacuum tubes ate up a bunch of it. And also they were super unreliable. Vacuum tubes would break all the time, that you would have to figure out which one broke. You would have to look at all of them, touch them, see if they're still warm and stuff like that, and replace them. And they wanted to make a machine that is more reliable, cheaper, and maybe even smaller. So yeah, they had all these kinds of modules that were transistor based. And they told Ben, fuse these together, make us our machine. And several sources state that even though he was told to only use the modules that existed, that he basically built half the machine from scratch, because he was like, I can't use this. I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to fuck it. I'm going to do it myself. he couldn't use the stuff that existed. And so he started the design of the prototype in the summer of 1959. And he was done 3 months later.
Okay.
Zip zap. He built the entire thing. The prototype was ready. And he kind of put out a paper on it.
Okay.
And it caused quite the stir and interest by the scientific community around the US, especially because they were able to produce a transistor-based machine. And what you must know about transistors, that they were actually, to buy a transistor is 10 times more expensive to buy a vacuum tube. So usually building transistor computers would be more expensive than building a vacuum tube computer. But they were able to build a transistor machine that was cheaper than a vacuum tube machine, but had similar computing power.
I mean, that's just lowering the price of such a thing.
Absolutely. And what they also did, like what the people also knew, this thing was basically the successor of confidential machines, because people knew about the TX0 and the TX2, but the TX0 and TX2 were confidential. These were military machines. Nobody could use them. And this was a privately owned prototype that could be sold to anyone. And people were like amazed to finally look into the technology, to the assembly of it, because these were three of the people that built these confidential, these secret prototypes that have not been revealed for a long time, or could only be viewed by people that had certain permissions.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that when you were talking about them working for the military. I was like, oh, okay, so they have all this knowledge of tech. It hadn't even occurred to me that tech would be confidential. Yeah, actually, interestingly, a lot of modern day tech, not all, but like a lot of the tech that built like the foundation for the crazy technological society we have now was funded by the military.
One of the biggest reasons for that is that military has huge amounts of money.
Yeah, turns out if you want to shoot other people, you can make a lot of money off of it.
The PDP-1.
Yeah, tell me about this computer.
It made them $800,000 of profit in back then money,
That's a shit ton of money.
which is 10 times the money today. Like that's $8 million. They made that amount of money in the fiscal year of 1962, and they did put a lot of effort into selling their machine because that was the idea. We have a computer that is cheaper. It only costs usually a computer would cost $5 million, $6 million. This machine sold for fantastic. How much do you think? How much did it cost if you wanted to buy it?
You said it was way cheaper.
It's
right?
way cheaper than a usual piece, than a normal computer at the time.
Let's say $500,000.
Or less. It was cheaper.
Really?
Yeah.
$100,000?
$120.
Okay, $100,000 was my first guess, but I was like, that's got to be too low.
Which still would be $1 million a day.
Yeah, that's still crazy.
Yeah. But
for what it was, though,
was
that's a bargain.
10 times to 50 times cheaper than any computer you would know. Finally, for some companies, it would become realistic to afford a machine like that. Because if you know how fast a machine can calculate things, you know how much money it saves you.
Yeah.
And they started to kind of put effort into selling it to people that were not familiar with computers. For example, to advertise the portability of the PDP-1, they put it in this tiny little portable house, and that kind of looked like a chunky tent, and they drove it all around the country. And they were like, look, we built a computer that fits into a house that is significantly smaller than the other houses all those other computers fit into.
I stocked my tiny home with a computer. Just one.
Yes.
So I have a question.
Yes.
I don't know if you would know the answer to this. So what were they saying the applications of this would be? Okay, so they want to get to a broader mass market, right? So let's just pretend that they're advertising to everybody. What are the hallmarks of this thing? What can it do that is just so great that I would need to cough up $1 million to get one?
The interesting thing is, I read a lot of correspondence between them where they were fighting about it. They had huge discussions about what the uses in the private sector could be. Ken Olsen was convinced that they should sell it to communication with each other, like automatic telephone management or connection management, and that they could kind of modulate their PDP-1 in such a way that it would automating of connecting people that wanted to call each other, because that was still done by hand, right? By telephone operators.
Yeah.
And others had other ideas, but they were still actively discussing it all the time. And because that wasn't really explored yet, how computers could be used in the private sector. Others would say it has to be used in the bank sector. It has to be used financially because we can do estimations much easier. We could just program in the mathematical equations, and it spits things out in seconds that humans take weeks for. So yeah, they just had debates about that.
Yeah, I was just curious because today it's obvious what the practical applications of computers are. I mean, I'm talking to you from the United States while you're in Germany, and we're recording a podcast, and I can see your face in real time, and that's crazy shit. But I'm thinking back then, how do you market that, right? And so it's interesting to me. I guess from what you're saying is they weren't totally sure how to do it, but if you just say this is a banking tool, right? I wonder if it would have taken off in the same way.
They were trying to figure it out themselves. And let's hear an example of what they did, for example, because they got it to a certain place. They drove it around in this tiny house, as I told you. Mm-hmm. And I found this letter written to them by the vice president of the Parachute Club of America. And it was sent...
What is that?
What's the Parachute Club of America?
What the fuck is the Parachute Club?
People that like to jump out of planes, I guess. And it was sent to Harlan Anderson to thank them for being able to use the PDP-1 to instantly calculate the scores of the skydivers, because they did point jumping where you would have to hit an aim, and they had complicated scoring system, and with the machine they could calculate it faster. So that's how they try to show people, look, the machine, it does your job. It makes things easier and much cooler. And the thing even includes, the letter includes a picture of the little house. It's on kind of a meadow. It looks like a tent, and within the tent you can see the PDP-1. It's one tower. Next to the tower is a desk, and on the desk you have a little you have a screen, a little TV
Right.
with a typewriter next to it.
Huh.
And it was surrounded by people that were just staring at the computer, trying to figure out what was going on.
Wow, look at it go!
Yeah, it says 12, 17, 5. How do we check this? I don't know. It's just telling me the numbers.
That's number wang.
That's number wang, everybody.
By the way, if you guys have no idea what that is, go look up the skit from That Mitchell and Webb. It's called Number Wang.
Yeah,
and it's a nonsensical game show.
It will make your day.
So that's Wanganum. And let's rotate the board.
So even though they went on these advertisement sprees to sell their machine, they must have kind of undersold it in terms of how they described its abilities. Because there's a letter from a nuclear scientist at MIT to Ben Gurley, which is basically them saying how they can't believe how cool this machine is. They make clear how it is far more reliable than advertised, and how the technical support which they received was extremely helpful, like whenever they called them, and any help they got was super nice and like informed. And I just quote the last sentence because it really sounds like a nuclear scientist that never gives out compliments trying to be nice about something that you experienced. I am not in the habit of writing testimonial letters, but I believe that so outstanding a performance on your part should not go without written comment. Best regards. It's some kind of German name. Of course, all the Germans are in the nuclear science department.
Of course, yeah. I mean, well, of course. So for those of you who don't know, after the war, World War II, the United States said, hey, all you German scientists who might be liking to escape persecution, why don't you come work for us and help us to develop a bunch of shit? And many of them took that opportunity.
Yeah, that helped American science a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the grandest...
Your face!
Yeah, it's okay. You don't have to be prosecuted if you're helpful, right? That's a morally solid standpoint.
Yeah, once you have utility, why throw out perfectly good German scientists?
Doesn't matter what you did before. So one of the grandest and probably most exciting things about the PDP-1.
Your face. Sorry.
The most exciting thing about this was that it had a display, a cathode ray display, and you must imagine this.
Sorry, I just totally have a case of the giggles here. Well, now your German scientist is spoiled. You're gonna have to throw him out. Nah. He's still got some use.
What's that? The Tom Lehrer quote: "I make rockets go up, not where they come down. That's not my department," says Werner von Braun.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's time to serious the fuck up.
Yes, let's do it. Okay, one of the coolest things that people really loved about the PDP-1 was that it had a display. And it had like one of those, young kids today don't know these kind of displays, but when we were young, they were still kind of prevalent. And just these big tubes, these glass tubes, and these are called cathode ray displays. And it's basically a glass tube that looks like an old TV set. And in the simplest of terms, it basically sends a stream of electrons through the tube towards the front, and they get bent by magnets. That's why you could put a magnet to these old TVs, and they would completely distort the picture because it would fuck with the technology.
Do you still have any of those old TVs? I ask for a specific reason.
I haven't seen one of them in a while.
Yeah. So I asked because I keep an old CRTV in my mother's attic, which is on a different coast at this point, because it's really hard to play the original hardware of certain video game consoles on newer TVs because there is a delay. And so a lot of people who are into retro stuff will keep some of these old TVs so that they can play the original hardware without input delays.
Oh, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I once heard that like pro gamers and certain esports, that they only use these kinds of displays because of that. Because there's no delay at all, and they fantasize about that their Counter-Strike kill streak gets better if they have a 0.004 second time ahead of the enemy to shoot them. I don't know.
How would you bring that to a tournament? Like, I can only play on a specific controller if I'm using my grandma's CRTV. Like,
I don't know, if you're sweaty enough, you'll get it done.
Maximum sweat.
Okay, so these things, they were invented in 1897 by a German dude, a physicist called Ferdinand Braun. And there's a fun fact about it, because he invented them, and a contemporary of him, of Braun, he was called Max Diekmann. He proposed to use these cathode rays tubes to display information, to display things, to use them as displays. And Braun very openly stated that that's bullshit, and that you shouldn't do that, and that's not how his technology will be used. But Diekmann didn't care and did it anyway. And he invented the first ever TV that was used for a long time, the Nipkow disc. And yeah, screw you, Ferdinand Braun, for not believing in your own technology.
Take that, Ferdinand Braun. Yeah, we fucking showed you. You're gonna write him a strongly worded letter.
Yeah, and this technology would be used in further iterations for the next 90 years.
Yeah.
Like in the 90s, it started to get replaced by the screens we use today. Back to the PDP-1. Having a device to receive instant output instead of having to read endless cryptic printouts, because usually your output from a computer would be a printout that would be coded, so you would have to decode it again. And just having a screen that would give you your information instantly or after the calculations were done was super helpful for people. And also they wouldn't feel as overwhelmed, because I think computers at the time felt even more overwhelming than computers can feel today, even though they still do. And this must have driven sales a lot, because it was a good way to visualize the use of the PDP-1 to people that were not computer scientists. The DEC ran into one problem, though. The DEC, the company that produced the PDP-1. Ken Olsen, he was kind of a free thinker. He was the boss of the company, and he was a true academic that must have despised his work at the military. He must have hated the hierarchy, the introduction of like this corporate structure that they were forced upon. And that's why he left and founded his own company, because he wanted to be free and he wanted to do whatever he wants to. But his company now, the DEC, they started growing. But he refused to put in any kind of hierarchy or any kind of organization or kind of set goals that they would achieve together. So everybody did whatever they wanted. And that caused them to not, after the PDP-1, to not achieve goals anymore. They kind of tried to produce a successor, the PDP-2, the PDP-3, both of them failed to technological problems. They never got published. And that's also when Ben Gurley left the company.
Interesting. You know, this reminds me of, I don't know if we talked about this in episode 4, but with Valve, where, oh no, it was episode 3, sorry, with Portal, the Portal episode we did. Valve has a very non-hierarchical like internal structure, and that's often pointed to as one of the reasons why they haven't finished some of their projects. Half-Life 3. But you know, I often wonder how useful that is. You know, some of the people that we've seen in different episodes have trouble with this hierarchy, like Yasuhiro Wada in the last one hated the whole hierarchy of video game making, right? But like, does it get results? I think that's, you know, up to question.
Anderson and Olsen, they had a falling out where Anderson was convinced that they had to introduce a structure, and he kind of snitched on Olsen because they had they were being financed by other people, and Anderson, even though he was technically underneath Olsen, he went past Olsen to the people that were financing them and told them, Olsen isn't doing shit. He's not organizing anything. We're not getting anything done because Olsen refuses to be the boss of this company. And Olsen got pissed and threw Anderson out. And Olsen would lead the company until 1990 for a very long time.
Wow.
And Anderson went somewhere else. But yeah, it didn't come down to them not making any money. They were kind of losing profit. They were growing too fast and couldn't keep up. But it came down to the leading engineers not agreeing on how to do it and then breaking apart. But Ben Gurley, he decided, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to go somewhere else. He left the company in 1963 when he was 36 years old. And he joined a new company, but never started there. He got shot at the dinner table by an old colleague of his from the DEC. Yeah.
Wow.
At first, I was like, will I get into this? Will I find out what happened? I tried to kind of it's unclear. There's like a book about it from a friend of Ben Gurley who wrote about what happened, but it's not really known what happened. The perpetrator was thrown into prison. There's different theories going around, but it was very tragic. He was like shot in front of his children.
Wow.
Yeah, really crazy.
Well,
so yeah, but now we're kind of stuck here, right? Because we didn't really reach any video game related thing. It's just a computer, right?
yeah.
But we do have the PDP-1, and let's introduce a new plotline here.
All right.
One thing you must know about the DEC, the company, is that they were kind of a meeting ground for all the nerds at MIT. So if you were on campus or you went to the mill is what they called their office because it was an old mill.
Okay.
If you didn't go to campus, you went to the mill and hung out there with the engineers, and you would kind of talk to them about what they were doing, look at the circuits, look at the prototypes of the PDP-1 and the other things they were building. And it was kind of a community place, because Ken Olsen, as we said, he hated the confidentiality of the Lincoln Labs, and he hated the structure and these in-group, out-group thing and the hierarchy. So everybody was part of it. It was a whole academic experience where people could learn from each other, kind of esoteric in a computer sciencey, nerdy way.
Right.
So yeah, anybody could come and go. It was nerd heaven. And one of those dudes that liked to come by was someone called Stephen Russell.
Okay.
And for some reason he's nicknamed Slug. So from now on, I have to call him Slug from now on. It's just going to happen.
Why do you guys call me Slug? Well, because you're sticky, and we like to metaphorically step on you sometimes.
He doesn't look like a slug, though. I looked at him. Looks like a handsome man. I don't know.
Strange fucking name.
So all the students and university employees knew about the PDP-1, and they hung out with the actual designers of the machine all the time. So once MIT bought a PDP-1, they actually knew how to operate it because they were hung out with the designers all the time.
Oh, I think I figured it out. I know what we're talking about.
What is it?
Metal Slug. Yep, it's a game about him. Metal Slug.
Metal Slug is a game about that dude. Yes.
Yeah, it's just him. He's like a self-insert.
Yeah, it's gonna be he programmed Metal Slug on the PDP-1.
This is the man I wish I could be.
Yeah, that's not it. Really close. Though.
Okay. Yeah. Well, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Metal Slug is also a computer game, so good job.
Yeah, I knew I was like somewhere in the ballpark. Like maybe I was like up in the stands, like licking dirt off the ground, but I was in there.
You were there. Okay. Someone saw you. So Slug and a bunch of other people that either worked, studied, or just hung out at MIT, they got access to the PDP-1 via a professor called Jack Dennis. Like the professors had access to the machines, and they could decide who could use them. And Jack Dennis, he was like, he made a deal with them. He was like, you can do with this machine whatever you want to, but in the end of the day, I want software that can be run on this. So I will not be here. You can do whatever you want. Just give me something that makes me, I don't know, a rich man or something. He wanted software. That's what he wanted.
Right. What a thing to say. I don't care what you fucking do with this multi-million-dollar computer as long as I can personally profit off of it.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the Professor Life, right?
Yeah, actually, interestingly enough, I'm pretty sure I don't own any of the things I produce while I'm at the university. I'm pretty sure they own all of the legal rights to all of the work that I did there, even though they don't really do anything to help me produce it. I mean, other than the people on my, my committee, right?
Yeah.
But like, it's not like the university administrators are coming in and they're like, "Hey, Tyler, yeah, we were looking at your paper there, and we thought you should change this to that."
Yeah, I mean, they kind of put in the existential to it, right? Without that, it wouldn't feel the same.
Of course, yes. If I did not constantly wake up in a cold sweat thinking about the massive amount of work that I have to do for my dissertation, I really don't think that it would be the same experience.
I get that now.
So that's why I pay them for that experience. It's very nice.
Yeah, right. It's a kind of an interactive experience.
Okay, actually, real quick fucking side detour. Andrew and I were talking about things that happened in our lives that we thought were like the most influential and important. And I was actually talking about how going to grad school was like probably the best thing I ever did for myself. So like, even though I talk about how scary and horrifying dissertations are, because they are, it was still really important. So don't let my shenanigans discourage you from pursuing higher education. All right.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm kind of 100% sure that this deal that they made kind of involved like a Peter Molyneux-esque conversation filled with kind of like half truth and empty promises. Like, so you guys can you guys worked with the DEC people, right? You know how to use this machine, and they're all like sitting in front of his office, like, are you asking us because you want to give us access to the PDP-1? And he's like, I mean, you know how to use it, right? And they're like, yeah. we totally know.
What are you doing over there, slug? Stephen Russell silently slides a can of beans back into his bag.
Yeah.
Nothing.
I thought,
just listening intently.
I thought I was supposed to bake beans here. No, not again. So yeah, it's 19. So this is we went back in time a bit, because this is 1961 again. 1963 is when Ben Gurley quit. So 1961, and Slug also gets access to the PDP-1, and he spends all of his time to create a game. He does not decide to put out useful software. He decides to make a game, and he does it for 6 months. And the game that he creates, it basically makes use of the display, and it involves 2 spaceships that you can fly. Like it's a 2-player game, and they fly around and they can shoot torpedoes at each other. If you hit the other spaceship, it's dead, and the other person won. And so he created this game, and he showed it to his friends. And after Slug's friends see the first version, they get really into it, and they start wasting all of their PDP-1 time that they get by this professor on improving this game instead of creating any other software. And they also start improving on it.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Am I correct in saying this is the first video game?
To actually say what the first video game is rather difficult. It is definitely one of the first video games.
Yeah, because I had heard that the first one was actually produced on like a radar screen.
Yeah, the PDP-1 display looks like a radar screen.
Okay, then that would make sense.
But at the same time, there was a game produced called Tennis with Friends in 1962 or 1961, and that is on an oscilloscope.
So the reason I ask is because I may or may not have like 10 sources open on my computer right now about the first video game with quotes, because I was going to do this episode, and I'm really glad I didn't.
Nice. There is a few other games that might be considered the first game. There is that other game that you could do that is called Tennis with Friends, that was played on an oscilloscope, but this one is not that. And so,
no, this is fine. I'm absolutely happy that this occurred.
All is good. So they start improving on this game. But I think I would just read an excerpt from a short article in the MIT's internal PDP-1. Like they had a magazine, an internal magazine that was only about the PDP-1, because that was a huge deal that they had this machine. That was called the Decuscope or Decuscope, something like that. If, when walking down the halls of MIT, you should happen to hear strange cries of, no, turn, fire, ooh, do not be alarmed. Another Western is not being filmed. MIT students and others are merely participating in a new sport, Spacewar, planned and programmed by Stephen R. Russell under the auspices of the Hingham Institute Study Group on Space Warfare. That's how they called their production company. They called it Hingham Institute Study Group on Space Warfare. It's amazing. Spacewar.
Wow.
Spacewar is an exciting game for 2 players, many kibitzes, and PDP-1. The game starts with each player in control of a spaceship displayed on a PDP scope face, equipped with a propulsion rockets, rotation gyros, and space torpedoes. The use of switches to control apparent motion of displayed objects demonstrates the real-time capabilities of the PDP-1. Also displayed on the scope is a central sun which exerts gravitational influence on the spaceships. This is something that his friends put in. Steve Russell didn't put this in. his friends came in and said, like, why is there a sun in the middle? And it would actually pull the ships into the middle, and you could make use of it to kind of slingshot yourself around and kind of do maneuvers.
That's really cool.
The entire battle is conducted against a slowly moving background of stars of the equatorial sky. The object of the game is to destroy the opponent's ship with torpedoes. The computer follows the targets, and participants have an opportunity to develop tactics which would be employed in any future warfare in space. At any given time, they pretended that this was an actual game to train for space warfare.
Yes, truly. When someday when we're having, our space war with the Galactic Conclave or whatever, they'll look back to this study group and say, this is where it all began.
Your editor visited the MIT computer in room 26265 and can verify an excellent performance. She learned that the best aces had only a 50% chance of survival. So it was only it was just a thing of chance if you won or didn't.
Yeah, it's literally a coin flip.
Enthusiasm nevertheless ran high, and the battle continued while young Mr. Russell tried to explain his program. The most important feature of the program, he said, is that one can simulate a reasonably complicated physical system and actually see what is going on. Mr. Russell also said that the symbolic and binary tapes were available. Please contact Mr. Russell for additional information. So he was able, they spread out the program. They gave the tapes out to other people so they could install it on their machines.
That's really cool.
And one thing is that, maybe let's first read a quote by another person that's called Albert Kuhlfeld. And he wrote for the Analog magazine in 1971. The first few years of Spacewar at MIT were the best. The game was in a rough state. Students were working their hearts out improving it, and the faculty was nodding benignly as they watched. The students learning computer theory faster and more painlessly than they'd ever seen before. And a background of real-time interactive programming was being built up that anybody in the school could draw on. One of the largest problems in the development of the game was having how to talk to a computer program and have it answer back. So what he's saying is that all of a sudden, these professors that told them, make a software, and all of a sudden all these students swarm into these rooms and start to make this game. But to make a game, you don't just write what you see on the surface, right? A game involves all kinds of functions and programs that run in the background. So all of a sudden they put in all of their time, more time, to create concepts that haven't been created before for a machine that is completely newly built. And all the professors are like, these kids are learning faster than in any of my boring lectures ever before. And so they just let it go. But also, while this was happening, they created all kinds of software that could be used in other applications. Mm-hmm. So, and the thing about Spacewar, the game is, it started spreading all over the country. Weeks after Slug showed it to people for the first time, each university would have their own version. In Minnesota, they'd play something called Minnesota Hyperspace. Because they had a different mechanic where you could turn invisible. You could go into hyperspace, and you would only be visible by your rocket flame if you were accelerating, which kind of put a different twist on the game. And others, other universities, included scoring systems or space mines that you had to kind of fly around, or partial damage, so you would have to be hit twice. Stuff like that. It was a modding community, but it took place in tiny study rooms in universities all over the country.
Man, if you guys could just see my face right now, I am just all smiles, imagining all of these nerdy college students losing their shit at the prospect of a video game, right?
It was the birth of the gaming nerd.
Yeah, right? To have and they're learning along the way, right? So not only is it the birth of the gaming nerd, it's the birth of video games, but it's also the birth of games as a teaching tool.
Yes, and that computer science, but especially not computer science, but that software design is intertwined with the creation of games.
Yeah.
The thing about Spacewar is that it wasn't just a game for as a game's sake. It was never sold, but like never sold, like the version that was spread like that was never sold. But
Yeah.
one thing that happened is that they used it to visualize the power of the PDP-1, because they could show people, like, look at this game. This game requires thousands of operations per second. This game ran at 60 FPS, right? It was it was completely fluent, and
that's crazy.
And they could show, like, look at how smooth this game runs. There's billions of torpedoes on the screen. There's little stars flowing by. There's the sun in the middle. There's like all this gravitational pull being calculated. This machine can do this reliably for long periods of times, because what were people, even people that knew computers, knew that being able to use a computer longer than 6 hours usually didn't work, because like a vacuum tube would break, or maybe the transistors weren't reliable enough or something like that. But the PDP-1, like, they could show off the reliability and the power of the machine. So I have two sources that claim that Spacewar was one of the biggest selling factors of the PDP-1.
How cool.
And yeah, and it also gave birth to basically the first video game genre, as you would say, because there is two games, as we said. There's Tennis with Friends, which was kind of a Pong-esque game that appeared before Pong. And there was a tic-tac-toe game on the Eduvac, which was a supercomputer in Britain in the 50s. But tic-tac-toe isn't really an original idea. It's just like if you program tic-tac-toe on a machine that cost you $10 million to build, that's just really ineffective tic-tac-toe, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
well, I mean, it's still like, hey, look what we can make this machine do.
Yeah. So, but you could basically consider this tic-tac-toe game probably the first game. It was called OXO. But people say that Spacewar probably is the real spirit, the truly first game that was ever created, especially because of the community aspect of it.
That is really cool.
Yeah. I do really love this entire story, because I think this can be projected onto something deeper than onto what it seems from the surface. This is, again, it's kind of a beautiful depiction of the human condition. Like, there's these naked monkeys on the shoulders of giants, and we have split the atom, and we're huddling in these tiny chambers around shiny boxes, picking each other's minds like lice stuck in the fur of our friends. And it's a mad world, and we make it madder every day, because we just can't help it. But as long as we kind of have each other, we'll be fine. And at the end of all of this, when I did the research, I was like, I hope Benjamin Gurley's kids were okay. And I hope they had each other, like all these students had each other in this huge community project that kind of made their life better, and that they could lean on each other. And because kind of in the end, we don't really have another choice than sticking together and helping each other out. And like, even if the torpedo volleys you right into the sun, you just gotta fire the thruster and keep on going. And kind of thankful you listened to my story, Tyler. And I'm glad to have you. I appreciate you. And I appreciate
you, my friend.
I appreciate all of you other guys too.
Yeah. So to tie into that story I was talking about earlier, Andrea and I have been doing this thing lately. Someone posted this little app they made on Reddit, and it's basically like a deck of cards that you can sit across the table from someone and like ask them like random questions, and it'll be like, let's talk about the first time we met, or like, what's something cool you learned from me?
That's cool.
And we were having, one of them was a discussion of like, what are things that changed your life? And one of them for me was starting streaming on Twitch, as dumb as that is, because like I've always loved video games, but what I really love about video games is being able to talk to other people about them. And so like, we're all playing Death Stranding right now, and that's just so exciting to me to be able to be like, did you find that thing? Did you go to that place? And none of us are looking at any guides, right? So when Jay tells me, hey, there's a hidden microchip that's over by the wind farm, but you got to walk around the back, like, that's fucking so cool to me, right?
Yeah.
And so like, anyway, my point is just like, I'm glad I have all of you. Yeah. And I'm glad that you and I became friends, because I just randomly decided to raid somebody one day who was playing Dead Cells. Here we are recording a podcast to all 7 of you who listened. So So to those 7 of you, I don't know, I'm making shit up. Thanks. It really means a lot that you are here and willing to listen to us ramble about whatever this is we do.
Yeah.
So,
and I would like to say thank you to all the people that support the stream directly, which would be Quad Laser that made the music for it, and Delco that helps us put it up online. And I would also like to wish all of you happy holidays and a Merry Christmas if you choose to have it.
Yeah. Thanks, Dachz. This episode was a Christmas miracle. Ta-da-da.
Yeah, let's hope little Timmy doesn't die of leukemia tomorrow.
Well, in the United States, he probably will.
Yeah.
But I digress. Thanks, everybody. You're all rad. Stay safe. Wear your fucking face masks. Oh my God, how hard is it? Wear your fucking masks.
Yeah, and also get your vaccine once it's out there.
Yeah. If your country decided to buy enough for its population. But don't use the spirit of giving to give other people coronavirus. But anyway, thanks again. You're all rad. This has been Codex Rex, the Video Game History Podcast. I'm Tyler.
I am Dachz, and we wish you a good day. Bye!